led me into this topic on today. Psalm 78, verses 17 through 19 says,
And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust. Yea, they spake against God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness?
In 2 Samuel, verses 17, verses 27 through 29.
And it came to pass, when David was come to Mahanaim, that Shobah, the son of Nahash, of Rabbah, of the children of Ammon, and Mashir, the son of Amiel, of Lodabar, and Barzillai, and the Gileadite of Roglin, brought beds and basins and earthen vessels, and wheat and barley and flour and parched corn, and beans and lentils and parched pulse, and honey and butter and sheep and cheese of kine for David, and for the people that were with him to eat. For they said, The people is hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness.
I want to talk about the plight of the wilderness. Talk about the plight of the wilderness. They have so many varied songs, and ushers, you may be seated once these are situated. Some of the great gospel songs of old speaks to us about the wilderness. As a matter of fact, the great gospel quartet who made headlines and became famous with one song, Tell Me How Did You Feel when you came out of the wilderness. Figuratively speaking, when I look at this text, the wilderness is always viewed as a place of nothingness. The wilderness is always viewed as a place of darkness in our life. And oftentimes we get confused and for some reason want to put our wilderness on God. God has to ask the church in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 31, O generation, see ye the word of the Lord. Have I been a wilderness unto Israel? Have I been a land of darkness? Sometimes God has to look at our situations and see where we are and hear what we're saying to him and wonder, are we blaming him for our wilderness? The wilderness is often described, brothers and sisters, as a negative experience. Folk don't brag about being in the wilderness. The wilderness is a place that the Bible says is generally depicted as not having fruit. It has little fountains. There are no pools of water. There are no rivers. There are no pleasant places in the wilderness. And so therefore, in Psalm 78, this maskil, which means it's an instructional song of woe, this maskil of Asaph asked the question in verse 19. It says, Yea, they spake against God. When they looked at their situation, they said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? In such a barren, darkened place, in such an empty state, can God truly furnish a table? Note the language now and the use of the word, because God uses words to drive our attention. It does not say, can God prepare a table? Because the preparation of a table is just the construction of 4 legs and a platform. It does not say, can he prepare a table? Because anybody with tools and wood can prepare a table in the wilderness, but can he furnish the table? In other words, can he not only prepare it, but can he put something on the table? And many times in our wilderness experience, that's the question that's racing through our mind. I see the table. I'm sitting in a house with a kitchen. I got 4 chairs around the table. It ain't the table that's the issue. It's the empty cupboards that's surrounding the table. So my question is not, can he prepare a table? I need to know, can he furnish the table? The question becomes, can he furnish the table? When he uses this Hebrew word midbar, which means simply wilderness, but it's described in so many different ways. When you see that word in the Hebrew text, it generally talks about a geographic region that's in a bad state. It generally talks about a countryside where there is trouble associated with the land. When you see that word, even when it's a pasture land, like in Joshua 2:22, that should be bringing praises to God. Jeremiah 23:10 says it's a place that eventually dries up. You can find a little life in the wilderness to start you on your journey, but eventually, if you're in the wilderness too long, it's going to be a place that dries up. And when you look at it, it's an uninhibited place. Nobody wants to live in the wilderness. Deuteronomy 32:10 says it's a place that's howling and wasteful. Job 38:26 says it's a place where no man is found. Jeremiah 9:1-2 says it's a place where you want to escape and find solitude, but you will find it there with many tears. The only time somebody picks the wilderness is in Proverbs 21:19, where he says it is better to dwell in the wilderness than in the presence of an angry woman. That's the only time. The Bible shows that somebody wants to be in the wilderness. Proverbs 21. Did I say that? Did I say Proverbs 21:19? I need somebody to go read that. Proverbs 21:19 says that's the only time a man wants to be in. I don't know where I'm at, but somebody needs that tonight. That's the only time I want to be in the wilderness, and if you don't treat it right, you will be in a desolate, dark, broke place. So the text says it's a place where some might want to choose to live, but in the long term and in the scheme of things, the wilderness is not a place where you want to be. But the problem in the text is that the wilderness has a way of making people forget what God has done. The wilderness has a way of removing from our mind all of the deeds that God has performed. The wilderness has a way of allowing us not to remember that we were in bondage, and we're now in the wilderness on our way to the promised land. The wilderness is a transition move, and many of us forget that we're in transition and would rather wind up back in bondage than being with God. The plight of the wilderness is that the wilderness has no long stay, no mainstay. It should be a short stay, but because so many of us forget who we are and how we got there, we keep staying in the wilderness 40 years instead of the 11 days that God has ordained. Some of us are in the wilderness a long time, not because the wilderness is so bad, but because we are so hard-headed and stiff-necked that we don't know how to tell God to thank you in the wilderness. The Psalm 38 is a whole example of how the great things God did for Israel. The entire Psalms deals with his majestic work in attaining their deliverance from evil and bondage. And yet it's a story of failure after failure. For in their captivity, he performed miracles through the form of plagues. At the crossing of the Red Sea, he performed a miracle through the use of a stretched out rod. In the feeding of the wilderness, he performed a miracle by blowing an east wind of quail, and then by bringing manna that he had baked in heaven. He performed all of these miracles, but after they had been in the wilderness a while, they asked the question, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? The text shows that they murmured against God. And so I've come to let you know it's a dangerous thing to murmur against God in your wilderness. And here's why. I give you three things and we'll let you go. They ask, can God furnish a table? I want to pick that up and change it and ask this, can God prepare a way? Can God prepare a way for me when I'm in a desolate, dark position? The wilderness does not necessarily have to be a geographic location. It can be a state of mind. Many of us can feel like we're in the wilderness. We can feel that we're in a place of darkness. We can feel that we're in a place of desolation. We can feel that we're all alone. We can feel that we're overwhelmed. We can feel that everything is drying up. And the question becomes in our mind is, and where I am, can God prepare a way? Can he prepare a way for me to get out of this wilderness? The wilderness always is a question of preparation, because when you look at specific wilderness experiences, it's a place that brings pain and suffering. In Exodus 16:1, it says the wilderness between Elam and Sinai was a place, a vast valley called the wilderness of sin. Many times we're in a wilderness of sin and don't know how to get ourselves out. We're in a wilderness of sin, overwhelmed and don't know how to work a way out. It's in Exodus 16:3, in the wilderness of sin, that the people began to murmur against God. And when sin takes control of your mind, it makes you want to go back to what you used to be. And so 16:3, they begin to murmur against God. And they said, oh, I wish to God that we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, because at least we were sitting by flesh pots and we did have bread to the full. You have brought us in this wilderness to kill us with hunger. We forget how bad it was when we were on the other side of the wilderness. The wilderness makes us wonder now, would it have been better for me in this way of trying to find a way prepared for me to have died in my sin, to have died in my bondage? Would I have been better off in the other side, dying on the end of a crack pipe, dying with some bad marijuana, dying with some bad alcohol, dying from a dirty needle, dying from an STD? Would I have been better off on the other side, dying in my sin? Because I cannot see where God can prepare a way out of this wilderness. The wilderness can play with your mind. It was in the wilderness there in 17:1 that the people murmured because there was no water to drink. The wilderness makes you think that God cannot prepare a way to lead you to a fountain of water. It was in Genesis 21:14. Hagar wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba, having been put out by Abraham, and wondered would God make a way for her. It was in Israel where they were led on the outside of Sinai in the wilderness in Numbers 10 and 12, where spies brought back an unfavorable report and said, yeah, there's good food in the promised land, but in this wilderness we're nothing but grasshoppers. Wilderness break you down. The wilderness will rob you of who you are. The wilderness will make you think you're nothing but a grasshopper in the midst of the situation. And even though God has shown you that there are grapes you cannot carry, a land flowing with milk and honey, the wilderness will rob you of your motivation. It will rob you of your vision. It will rob you of your tenacity and make you think that God cannot prepare a way. In your wilderness, it's the wilderness that allows us to understand in Exodus 19 that God makes the people pitch their tent and camp around the wilderness of Sinai because they have angered God. When God makes you pitch your tent, He's trying to tell you, I'm not moving too fast. God had never told these individuals to pitch their tents. He had never told them to set up camp, because God was preparing a way through the wilderness. But when you get in the wilderness and forget who you are, the Psalm 78 text says that in verse 18, they begin to tempt God in their heart by asking meat for their lusts. In other words, they lost appreciation for who God was until God had them camp out in the wilderness because somebody didn't believe God could prepare a way. Isn't it amazing? He can part the Red Sea, but you don't think He can prepare a way. He can make every Egyptian give you gold and silver, and you don't think He can make a way. He can put clothing on your back when you're in the midst of slavery and make you leave as a wealthy nation. He can take 70 people and make them 1,200,000 and lead them as a mighty army across the Red Sea. And you don't think God can prepare a way. Isn't it amazing that you had situations where your light bill was due? You had situations where your gas had been turned on. You had situations where you were flat broke and did not miss one day of work. You had situations where your cupboards were empty and you never missed a meal. You had situations where your kids were bad as you know what, and yet they never went to jail. You had all those situations, and you have the audacity to sit in your wilderness now and ask, can God prepare a way? So the Lord asked the question. The whole problem of the question is that we got to remember what's going on in the wilderness. We can't forget God who brought us to the wilderness with the intent of taking us through the wilderness. Verse 22 of the text says that because they believed not in God and trusted not in His deliverance of salvation, they find themselves camped out in the wilderness. Oh, beloved, I don't want you to be in the plight of the wilderness where you're camped out. We all gonna have wilderness encounters, but I would hope that we would understand we don't have to dwell there all day. Everybody got to go through a wilderness because the wilderness always surrounds your mountain. A wilderness is always a valley between your high point and your low point. A wilderness is a point where the rain is not falling, where the grass is not fertile. I've got to get through the wilderness, and so I've got to remember Psalms 23 and 5, that not only does God prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies, but surrounding that preparation of the table is still waters and green pastures and goodness and mercy following me all the days of my life. So I'm not asking, can God prepare a way? No. I'm asking, can God pamper the worn? What do you mean? Well, I believe He'll prepare the way. But sometime on my journey, I need what y'all women here call a pamper me night. I've been worn out by the struggle. I've been worn out by affliction and pain. I'm tired of trying to carry this cross all by myself. I've been beat up in the wilderness, but I recognize that God is not through with me yet. I recognize that I've got to stay in the wilderness for just a little while longer. I'm not complaining because I'm in the wilderness. I know that God said, please be patient with me. I know that a day with the Lord is like 1,000 years. So Lord, I'm not complaining. I'm not asking, can you furnish a table? I'm not asking, can you prepare a way? Because you made preparation day in and day out. But what I am asking, if you don't mind, can you pamper me for just one night? Now some of y'all don't believe that you can ask that person. That's why I combine these topics. I combine Psalm 78 where the question is asked, can he furnish? And then if you look over in 2 Samuel 17:29, that's exactly what he did. He did not furnish a table. He pampered the worn. He gave them some stuff they did not deserve. Did you look at that text? When you study the history that surrounds Psalm 2 Samuel 17, David is in the wilderness of Judah. The records say in Psalm 63 that he is saying, "O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul is thirsting for thee. My flesh is longing for thee in a dry and a thirsty land." I'm longing for you. And what I need is what you can bring. I'm not asking for victory. I'm not asking to take me out of my storm, because somebody here needs to know storms are good for us. Yeah, you ought to stop saying, "Lord, take me out of my storm." You ought to stop praying, "Lord, take me out of my valley." Do you understand that James says there's an early rain and a latter rain? You can't get the harvest of the latter rain till you've endured the early rain. And in between the early rain and the latter rain is a seed planting and growth session that has to take place. So I'm not asking you, Lord, to stop anything, but I would like to be pampered for just one night. Can I just give one night? And listen to what he does in 2 Samuel. So when David seeks this, he's in the wilderness. First, the wilderness of Ziph, where Saul is trying to slay him. And 1 Samuel 22:14 says God has to carry him through. He gets through that wilderness, and now his own son is chasing him. Absalom is on his track. Him and his men have been out in the wilderness for a long time, and look what God does. If this ain't a pamper me night, I don't know what is. The text says that messengers came and they brought beds and mats. In other words, you've been sleeping on rocks and ground too long. While you're in this valley, just let me bring you a bed, a pillow, and a mat. Not that you're going to carry it, because listen to me now, it's a pamper me night for the worn. You can't travel with beds on your back. You can't move quick in war trying to make up your bed and all of that stuff. They don't carry cots in the battlefield. They don't have structures with iron rails and box spring mattresses when they're walking into warfare. They sleep in foxholes. They have little things that they can lay their head down. They make pillows like Jacob did out of rocks and out of their baggage. They don't have comforter bed. So he's saying to him, David, you're a man of war. You can't travel with these beds. You can't have all this stuff. You don't have a caravan. But for one night, the people are worn out. One night, the people are hungry. Let them lay in the comfort of a bed and a mat. Sometimes that's all I want God to do. Just give me one good night where I can regroup. Just give me one good night where I can re-energize. Just give me one good night where I can revitalize. Just give me one good night where I can come to my senses and recognize it ain't over. Can God pamper the worn? I think the text says he can. No matter where you are, God can pamper you. Because not only does he to give them a place to sleep. But look at the text. I'm not going to exegete it. You guys can read that clearly. That text is so clear. Not only did he bring beds and mats to sleep on, but he brought bowls to eat out of. He brought utensils to prepare. He brought them baking utensils. He brought food ingredients that they could eat a good meal. And look at God. When you've been good to God, God will give you a little honey and cheese. Look at the text. Look at the text. All they needed was a good meal. All they needed was a sandwich. All they needed was some bread. All they needed was a little venison, a little deer, a little meat. But God looked beyond that and said, you men are hungry. You men are weary. You men are thirsty. Not only here's the key ingredient of what they need, but here's some honey and cheese to let them appreciate what I got for them on the other side. I know that God will supply my needs, but I'm so grateful that every now and then he gives me a desire. I know that God will prepare a way, but I understand that it's only in God I can get my answer. And so, beloved, I just wanted to tell somebody today that the entire journey of God's people is always up and in and out of a wilderness. And sometimes you got to understand that the wilderness is trying you. The table is asked question in Psalm 78, and I think the answer is given clearly in 2 Samuel verse 17. And so the text really does not need explanation or preaching. The Bible answers the question for itself. Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? 2 Samuel 17 says yes, he can not only furnish the table, but he can pamper those who are worn out from the journey around the table. And when I looked at the beds and everything that was going on, it gave me just one last thought, that sometime I need to not only have a pamperment night for the worn, but sometime I need provision for the weary. And I don't know about you, but when I ask the question, can he prepare a table in the wilderness? Can he pamper the worn in the wilderness? Can he provide for the weary in the wilderness? And I don't know how you're handling your storm, but I have not only been worn out in wilderness experiences, but sometimes the elders used to say that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that sometime I got to get to the point where the weary can cease from their suffering. And I got to get to the point where I understand that I'm not only now waiting on God, but I got to wait with patience so that God can understand I'm not giving up on my hope. And so sometimes, beloved, while you're in the plight of the wilderness, I know you're tired and I know it's been a long and tedious journey, but I need to encourage somebody tonight and tell you, don't give up on God. I need to tell you that no matter how long you've been in the wilderness, there is still hope that you can cross over on the other side. I need somebody to understand that I don't know how long your journey will be. I could not tell the children of Israel what was going to happen in their wilderness. If you look on a map, they should have been there through the short upper route in 4 days. But God decided to take them around the side so they didn't have to go through the valley of the Philistines, because they were not ready to be a people of war. And then it said that that journey could have took them through 11 days, but instead he detoured them one more time and said, you got to see the mighty work of God. And so instead of going around the peninsula on dry land, he took them to the Red Sea to let them understand I'm a God who can hold back the waters of your life. And when they crossed on dry ground, somebody needs to answer me, ain't that God preparing a way? He led them through and they could have got across in 11 days. But 40 years later, here they are, camped around Mount Sinai, still asking the same question. Now let me help somebody. You've been eating for 40 years. There's no public or Winn-Dixie. You've been clothed for 40 years. Your shoes are still intact, and you still got health and strength, and you have the nerve to ask the question, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Let me help somebody. In 2011, you've been out of work for over 6-7 months. Your bills are racking up, but you still got shelter over your head. You are up to debt in your eyeballs, but yet you're still driving good cars. You owe so much money, but yet you're still wearing nice clothes. You're flat broke, but you eat at the best restaurants in town. You don't have a dime, but yet you're doing fine. And you got the nerve to ask the question, can God prepare a table in your wilderness? Let me help somebody over here. You've been sick a long time, and your insurance done ran out. Your prescription drugs are costing you everything you have, but yet you're still healthy. You're not in a nursing home. You're not in a rehab center. You're not in a hospital. You're past the age where your medicine should work. Your disease and your affliction has robbed you on your job. Your family won't help you, and no deacon has enough in benevolent to get your last prescription. But here you are, waving your hand. Here you are in the sanctuary, giving God the praise, and you have the audacity to ask the question, can the Lord furnish a table? Well, I've come to tell you, I don't know your malady, I don't know your plight, and I don't know your timetable, but one thing I know, what He done for us, He'll do the same just for you. Can God prepare a table? Well, somebody will tell you that He'll make a way out of nowhere. He'll pamper me in my midnight hour. He'll give me things that I don't deserve. I asked Him for a suit. He gave me cufflinks, shirt, and tie. I asked Him for socks. He put shoes on my feet. I asked Him for a lot of things, but He keep on doing great things. I needed transportation. He gave me a car and had the audacity to fill it up with gas. And God is good. And so here I am, not ashamed of my wilderness. I know that unemployment is raging high, but here you are, never miss a day. Here you are, promoted on your job. Here you are, turning down offers, and you got the nerve to ask the question, can God furnish a table? Well, I've come to close it up, that I was in a wilderness between Eden and Sinai, called the wilderness of sin. No way out and no way in, but God because he went in like a natural man, but he came out a grown God with all fire. Can God make a way? Say it. Can God finish your table? Say it. Can God pamper you when you die? Say it. Won't he do it? Ain't he all right? Yeah.
Amen. Give him some praise. Give him some praise. Give him some praise. Let's give him praise. When I think about Jesus and all he's done for me, I can dance, 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 dance all night. Somebody give him praise.